What does it take to create a vibrant, thriving life? First, the sad news is that Thoreau was right. Most people are leading quiet lives of desperation, lacking in meaning, fulfillment, and vitality. But we choose more. We choose to create extraordinary lives. And the Art of Vibrant Living show entertains you with inspiration, empowerment, and education to create your life into a masterpiece. It's time. Let's vibe up. Aloha, y'all. Welcome to the show. I am Daniel Aaron, your host. This is the Art of Vibrant Living show, and we got an awesome show, a fantastic guest. And in case it's not obvious, the Art of Vibrant Living implies you have the birthright, maybe even the destiny, maybe even the obligation to live a vibrant, thriving life, to make your life a masterpiece. It does not tend to happen by default. It takes intention, it takes some work, and it takes a bit of education. Here's my request, suggestion. I implore you, please enjoy the show, be entertained, yes, and commit that when you hear something that makes sense to you and you go, yeah, I could do that. That would benefit my life, that you commit to putting it into action in your life ASAP. Maybe today, maybe right after the show. Here's the thing, y'all. Vibrancy is so important, not just for you, for the entire world. There's too much of the world right now that's just kind of getting by. So if you are wanting more in your life, if you want to thrive more, if you want to increase your income, the quality of your relationships, your health, then please also reach out. I would love to connect with you and learn how I can support you. You can send me an email, daniel@danielaaron.com. And today on the show, very exciting, Gina Nicole is she's an author. She's a spiritual mentor, a Feng Shui expert, versed in the world of esoteric art and science, yet also very grounded and wise, practical. So I'm super thrilled that we've got her with us. And Gina, thank you for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, it's a treat, and you've got so much cool experience of a broad nature. So before I dive in with my 486 questions that I have for you, because I know I got a lot to learn today, would you tell our audience a little bit about how you got into this stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, so many of our stories when it comes to purpose, they have to do with sort of like your hard moments, your Saturn return moments, if you will. And that was the case for me. So I was, really not well, feeling diseased in my body, and couldn't find a solution, couldn't find an answer. Medications wouldn't work, all of the things. And I was working with a acupuncturist, actually, at the time, who kind of gave me some Feng Shui tips. And then my healing really started. So it sparked something in me that caused me to, learn more, do more. And from there, it was just like a waterfall effect of like, I wanted to do more. I did. I dove in for myself and learned all of the things. And then I just kept going and eventually helping other people. Yeah, I had to leave like a pretty well-paid job, which was scary, and took a scary leap. And then I continued to just follow the fear. And that's something that I'm really big at. I think that we need to follow the fear prompts instead of let us take them over. And that just, kept leaping, kept following every breadcrumb, and didn't leave any stone left unturned. And here I am. That's really how I got here. Yeah.
Well, cool. Thank you. And I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability with that. And let's be clear. In a way, you said you had to leave that job. Well, you didn't really have to necessarily, right? Because most people, stay way, way, way too long in places they know it's maybe not serving them or serving the world. And
Yeah.
of course, we got a hint into that. You said follow the fear, and this seems to be something like a mantra or a way of being. So I'll play angel's advocate for a moment and say, but wait, isn't the fear telling us there's danger? Shouldn't we stay away from the fear? What are you talking about?
Yeah, I mean, fear is really helpful, right? Like it's a good point. Like we do need some fear. It keeps us safe. It keeps us our roots chakra strong at times. But one example, it was very scary to leave that high paying job, but that high paying job also really kept my nervous system like this. It kept me in fight, flight, freeze. It was really hard to leave the salary. I left this career, really, I was doing very well for my age. And I left it to literally make almost less than a third of what I was being paid. So that's a lot. And I was living in the Bay Area of California at the time, very expensive. And I left to work at an acupuncture college, actually, so that I could afford, receiving a lot more acupuncture as I was learning. And then, my body really started to heal. My nervous system started to unwind. And I was like, okay, well, what's next? What's a job that I could, have a lot of space to create the life that I would like to create? And yet something that would require a bit of a leap. Well, at the time, I was actually very afraid of flying. I was like petrified of flying. So I thought, well, maybe I could be a flight attendant because that schedule is amazing. I could conquer my fear. And so that's what I did. So I literally followed the fear. I feng shuied my apartment at the time to call in a flight attendant position. And a month later, I was in a training at Virgin America. And I was flying, which was great. I was, had a lot of time and opportunity. I worked half the month and was off half the month, and I could do this work. I could study. I was started to do angel card readings and do more feng shui for people. And so that's an example of following my fear that was, in a healthy way. I think fear tells us to take action. And so what could I do with my fear of flying, right? How could I get over it? I was like, well, learn about it and just do it. So that's what I did. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And what a great example. And of course, I was being a little silly in my angel's advocate role there for a moment. And the way I think of it is like, well, we all have these two parts, well, at least two parts, usually more, but the one part, the biological survival oriented part. And, for that part, it's always looking for fear, right? But the soul part, the invincible, the eternal part, the problem is that so much of what the survival part thinks is dangerous really isn't that dangerous. Like flying is a great example. Like, some of us could get really scared, but the truth is, if you look at it empirically and statistically, it's not very dangerous. And what would you say? And I'm leading the witness here very intentionally, but what happens? What are the advantages when we follow the fear?
So, as I mentioned, I learned a lot more. I learned about flying. I learned how turbulence was really healthy. I learned about the dynamics of aviation and, having the role of a flight attendant who's there for primarily safety and learning about safety features. It really helped to stop my monkey mind. That alone, just learning more and gathering more information helped to calm some of my anxiety. So I think that was, that's important. And then actually doing it. So I think by the time I was actually flying, I just it wasn't even a thing. Like turbulence didn't bother me. It just wasn't a thing. Um, Somebody once asked me, well, was that because maybe you had more control over, you had a sense of control over what was happening, or you had control knowing that you had easier access to an exit door? And I thought that was a great question. I had to ponder it, but I really think it was like the knowledge base, just really looking at what the fear is, and when I take action around it and I learn and I gather information, I think it was more of that. Like I just wasn't, there was nothing left that was, David and Goliath. Like it just wasn't what it seemed my whole life. you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, it makes great sense. And it's funny, we had a comment. I'm curious to see your perspective on this. Brian chimed in and says, fear tells us to take action. I got a thought on that, but I want to hear your thought first.
Yeah, no, I think that's like, absolutely. And that's what I was really leaning into. It tells us to take action and get more information. And it's like, well, how can I take action on my fear of flying? I could either just book a whole bunch of travel and continue to do it, or I could go into the action of learning. And, so I really do. Just as if it would be scary to put your body in front of a bus, but you would move, like the fear would tell you to move out of the way, like to not be there. So like that's what it was. So I always look at that. I also do human design, and this is a little bit out there, but like the spleen channel gives us a lot of information about fear. And so it really points to, it's one place in human design, if you're familiar, that points to what your fears are, and you do them anyway. You don't listen, you do them anyway. And then it's like the one place that it's not aligned. Like you find them, you identify them, and you do it anyway. Yeah.
Well, that's beautiful. And what I was thinking in terms of Brian's comment, fear tells us to take action. I think, well, I guess it depends. For me, it depends on who are we defining as us, right? Because again, if we've got different parts of us, the truest part, the highest self, what I call the supreme self, when we get fear, yes, that it tells that part, okay, it's time to step up. But on another level, the fear tells the survival part, like, oh, hold back, don't do anything. And part of my experience is, and I'm curious if this lands for you, is every time I feel a fear and then do the thing that I'm afraid of anyway, or face it somehow, there's like an immediate rush of energy, right? And because
Mhm.
the fear, my holding back from whatever it was because of the fear, like just kind of squashes my energy. And so and sometimes I don't even have to do the thing. It's just when I go like, okay, I'm not going to have that hold me back. As soon as I make the decision, it's like I don't even have to do it anymore because I faced it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. For sure. I mean, and you say that, you say that you can feel that rush of energy. Like for me, that's very real. It is energy. It's energy. It's emotion in motion. It's energy. And that moving through your body, moving through your chakra centers, it's clearing, it's moving. It's a literally getting stuff in flow. That's how I see that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to go back to something you said before, which is super cool, because you said at that point when you said, all right, I'm going to face my fear of flying and, what's what? We're going to go straight into it, become a flight attendant, so that you rearranged your apartment, you feng shuied it to call in a flight attendant job, right? And I remember learning about feng shui when I first moved to Omega Institute, 1996, and that was like such a revelation to me, this concept. And I grew up in a home that was like the quintessential opposite of feng shui. It was like clutter, mess, nastiness, and I didn't know any better, but it drove me crazy, probably quite literally.
Probably literally, yeah.
And then later, as I went into learning about body and health and fasting and cleansing and yoga, I started to realize, wow, how important is our physical environment, and how much it's a representation of what's going on the inside, physically and mentally and spiritually and emotionally. Two is it's a way that affects how we feel, right? And now this to me is incredibly obvious, a little bit less obvious to my 16-year-old daughter, but we're working on that. I'm curious though, because clearly you've gone very far in this art and science. How, for someone who's not familiar with it, how would you explain what it is and why it's important?
Yeah, this is a great question. My approach is something that's called the cosmic trinity, and that is, it's a trinity of, you could say, dynamics that are divided into three parts. It's human luck, which is the mind; heavenly luck, which is going to be your connection with spirit; and then earth luck, which is your body and home. And I always say that we take a mind, body, spirit, and home approach because everything is interlinked. Actually, I have a mentorship container, and every month we go into something new. And this month we're looking at how the Bagua map. So I study BTB Feng Shui. There's many different schools of Feng Shui. And I always say that there are no rules. Yet in Feng Shui, the only thing that you can do to really confuse things and confuse yourself is to mix the schools. I never advise mixing the schools unless you're working with a practitioner that can do so in a way that is easeful and makes sense. Like it gets very complicated when you start mixing the schools. Like there's compass, flying star, BTB. I study BTB Feng Shui. I learned from Professor Edgar Sung in San Francisco. Spent many weekends with him in my 20s. And so it's using the Bagua map. And, the Bagua map is like a tic-tac-toe grid that's placed over your home, stretched over your home. It can be a little confusing if your home is not the perfect square or rectangle, which most are not, right? So then there's like missing sectors, extended sectors. You kind of, it can be layered, but it's not that complicated. It's not scary. It's easy to do. You could also use your intuition to find it. But what we're looking at this month in the mentorship container is how those different parts of the home actually now link to not only areas like career, relationship, health and family, wealth and abundance, but also the body, the lungs, the heart, the eyes, the liver, parts of the body, and mother, father, daughters, oldest daughter, youngest daughter, middle daughter, oldest son, etc. So all of these different sectors, squares, of space link to different aspects of all of the things, body, mind, organs, right? And it's a thing. I actually wrote this little guy. It's called House Speak. It's just a very thin little book. And it connects every part of your home to, an area of your life. And it's never not helpful. I don't want to say like it's never wrong. Again, I don't like I'm saying never. I don't, right and wrong. We don't have to go there, but it's always really supportive, to look at. And I get it all the time. I got it so much, like people asking, well, what does it mean if, or what does it mean if? And so I finally just put together a resource guide that was like, here, your refrigerator's down. Here's some possible meanings. Your toilet's giving you a problem. Here's some possible meaning, right? So I think that once you start to look, you can't unlook. It's like, you know what I mean? Because it just gives you so much good information. And it can be so helpful in that sense that why not just use the added resource, So that's my like approach on Feng Shui. And usually decluttering is where it starts for a lot of people, right? We don't realize the amount of stuff and the things we have. And clutter is real. The effects of clutter is real. I've seen it time and again. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Well, so there's a old Hermetic principle that everybody has heard in some way: as within, so without; as above, so below. Right. And that points to an important thing that I think is very pertinent here. And so, but let's go a little deeper then, because this is fascinating and I think really useful for people. Clutter is real. The impact of it is real. I immediately think of one of my best friends from way back when I was a kid. And if you're listening, Ted, I love you. As I say this, and his house is just so filled with stuff. Like I go in, and after like 5 minutes, I'm like, I gotta get out of here. Like it's just like my nervous system starts getting shaky with it. And I have other friends whose homes are like super zen and sparse. And I've always, been very conscious about the way I create my home. So, I have an intuitive sense of it, but I don't know scientifically, or, there's so much information you have. So clutter, it's real. The impact is real. What's the impact? What happens?
Yeah, I think it's, if you can imagine, and we could go really deep on this, right? Because I could say, okay, well, let's look at like the most cluttered area in your home. Where does that fall? I live in California now, but for the past several years, my husband and I, my family and I were in St. Louis, and it was very common for people's basements. That was a big thing. My basement, or the garage, but like my basement is cluttered. Everybody just puts stuff in the basement. Well, think about a basement. What is a basement really significant of? Or what is that, with the symbolism of that? It could be unconscious thoughts. It could be unconscious patterns. beliefs, right? So it tells a story. It's not just about the stuff, because the stuff in general, it's like we don't want or need the added stuff. We don't want or need the added clutter. It signifies, right? Stuff, just energy that we don't need, which just densifies our life. And we need an open road. We need space, right? To allow for opportunity and abundance and prosperity, which is not money. I'm talking about, abundance and flow to overflow our lives. And when you have clutter, there's blocks. So if you can imagine that your front door was the mouth of a dam, right? And you had water that entered through the dam, you would want the water to move through with ease, with love, with grace and peace and flow, not banging into things. And clutter causes the banging and the waves and the crashing and the spark. And you want it to be flow. You want it to be lovely and easeful. And, so that's kind of how I look at it. But then if we go deeper, it's like, okay, well, where's the clutter? Is it, where is it? Is it in the basement? Unconscious thoughts? Is it, through the bathroom? There's a lot to do with self-care. Bedroom, a lot to do with relationships in your life. So I can take it even deeper. I like to really, and then like the Bagwell map linking to the body, right? So what's happening with that certain organ that it's linked to in the house. So it tells this whole story. It's like a reflective art. It's like reflective artwork that's showing you kind of what's going on, a depiction of what's happening in your life. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Very cool. And that's a great image for it, of the front door being the mouth and the water coming in. And because I've certainly heard, I guess most people have heard, like, Feng Shui is about the flow of energy in the house. And that can be a little mysterious for people in ways, but the water makes a lot of sense. So let me get your take on this. I learned a couple of years ago an expression, as I heard it, from Chinese medicine, which says, I'm getting some strange noise, that a house fire where nobody is hurt is considered a blessing. And I'll tell you why that became pertinent for me. But I want to hear from you first. Have you heard that? What sense do you make of it from your perspective?
I've never heard that, but I love, the element of fire is so there's this purification, there's transmutation, right. So like when you look at, I can see the perspective of, like, it really can take away everything that does not serve, on some aspects. There's also inflammation, right? Like there's also that, and we don't want that necessarily. But yeah, it can purify, it can cleanse, it can take away. It's nature's way of just saying, let's just remove what's not needed, right? So and as long as everybody's safe, and as long as there is no harm, there's no harm done. I mean, is it aligned? Is the stuff aligned, or is it just spirit's way of helping you to align, right? This is happening for me, not to me. I try to say that with everything, with everything in life. This is happening for me and with me, not to me. So it's interesting.
Well, okay, cool. So that's great. It makes total sense to me. And that when I learned the phrase, it was because I had been for years living in Bali, and lived there for 13 years, and I accumulated a lot of stuff. I mean, and to the point that I remember the last time we moved house, it took like not one truck, but 2 trucks, and not one moving crew, but 2 moving crews. We have built up so much stuff. And strange circumstances, long story. It turned out, though, that my daughter and I found out, oh, actually, we're not going home. So overnight, we lost our home and all our stuff. And so we were literally on a trip. We had 2 suitcases, and that was it. And, honestly, my first response was not, oh, what a great blessing. My first response was like, all our stuff and our dog. That was the worst part of it. However, and it wasn't a house fire, though, as I settled in and, like you, practicing, okay, this is happening for me. How is this happening for me? What are the gifts in this? Right? Physician, heal thyself. Preacher, listen to what you have to say. So as I started to understand more, then I came to see, wow, what a great blessing. And on some level, all that physical stuff that I had there was representative of my past, right? So in a way, it was freeing me up to create differently, to become differently. So does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. And it is awful. I mean, and you know, like with the fires that happened in Maui, like that was awful. I mean, that's awful. And there were a lot of hurt people and there were a lot of, so it's like there's a spectrum, right? So like from a more philosophical perspective, I think of my teacher when you're saying this, like I can definitely see the perspective and the meaning behind that. At the same time, we're human. And so there's aspects of these tragedies that can still be they're really hard to cope with. And it can be hard. It can be difficult to say, this is happening for me, right? Like, especially when all of the misfortune happened in Maui, like I would have never said to anyone like, oh, this is happening for you. Like that was absolutely awful. So I think it's, it also is, every situation is so different. And I want to just honor that aspect, right? But I could absolutely see my teacher saying something like that. Like that in school. In a higher perspective, trying to connect with higher consciousness. And
Absolutely. I mean, the fact that it's a blessing doesn't mean that we're going to feel that or realize it in the moment. And it's worthwhile honoring the human experience, even while we strive to come to a greater perspective. I remember when 9/11 happened, I was in New York that day and I was right close to it. And I saw the whole thing happen. A few days later, I was with Ram Dass, who's one of my favorite teachers and who lived on Maui for many years. And somebody interviewed him saying, what do you think about this tragedy? And I remember his response was so stark and controversial at the time. What he said, there's no tragedy here, because from the spiritual perspective, there's nothing is wrong. And I was like, that's high level truth for sure. And he was a very compassionate guy. So he had the rapport to be able to say something like that. But and I'm 100% with you. I'm very cautious about anyone's experience is real and honorable, worthy of honor. So I would also, especially here on Maui where I live, I'd never say that to anyone. But let's go to the next level though, because I know what so many people want to hear and what they want to know about Feng Shui, and you must get this all the time, is what do I do to bring in the money? How do I get rich by, putting flowers in my house and changing where the sofa goes?
Yeah, I know money is such a thing. Money, relationships, health, they're like the three things that people want to know about the most. And it's so like, remember, mind, body, spirit, and home, right? Like, so I think that's so important. And also the method that I work with, the school that I work with, there's intention setting. And I always will honor Professor Lin Yun brought BTB to the States. And he has like a special kind of thing. And we don't ever talk about that publicly, so but what I will say is there's an intention process that goes with the placement. So it's not just, like you move these things. Sometimes you move these things, you change your life. Like there could, but the intention has to be aligned. The intention has to be there. So I want to preface what I'm about to say with that, because intention matters, and it is a mind, body, spirit, and home approach. So you can, if your mind is in non-abundant thinking, you can't just, put a lucky frog in your wealth sector and like call it a day there. Well, you can, and you can see what happens, but the wealth, prosperity, abundance sector, and where money lives in the Bagua map is the back left sector in BTB Feng Shui. It's from the front door. And so, first you would want to make sure, we talked about that water, right? That's coming into your door. Well, make sure that the water can even get to your door, right? Like, I mean, it's the friend test. I always say, do the friend test. Invite a friend over that has never been. And if they can find your home easily, energy's finding you easily, right? But do the friend test. So that's the first thing. Pay attention to the front door. How is energy finding you? Is there a clear pathway to the door? Then when you get to the door, is water crashing to try to get to the back left corner of your home? Energy naturally likes to move left to right when we're looking at feng shui, typically speaking. So then you would want to kind of go follow that flow to the back left corner of your home. What is there? So there's 5 elements. So we're, in feng shui, we work with water, wood, fire, earth, and metal. And there's a constructive and destructive cycle. So the sector 4 of wealth is working with wood. It's of the wood element. And what feeds wood, what helps a tree to grow, is water. So you want a balance of all 5 elements, but you want to kind of keep it water, wood heavy. I will also say that when I'm working with feng shui with someone, I look at their personal element. So that's something that I do via their birth information. We don't have to necessarily do that, but it's helpful to do that because we're able to feng shui a space much more appropriately, maybe more specifically. We can get, a little bit deeper by knowing your element because that, it can be helpful, right? But intention also trumps. So you would really want to amplify that space, that back left sector of your home, wood, think plants, greens, blues. People think blue, bright blue is a watercolor. It's actually wood. Bright blue is wood in BTB. And then you can also think like watercolors. Think of the water at the bottom of a lake, deep navy, blacks, deep grays, light grays, metal. And you want the space to be reflective of all of the elements, really, but you want it to be wood and water heavy. And then you'd also want to look for, pointing arrows, which would be like sharp corners coming into the space. You would, do you have stairs? That's rushing energy. So there's all these other things to consider too. I like to kind of be a bad girl when it comes to this and challenge the rules. We moved into a home most recently, and there's a lot of feng shui no-nos. And I was a little bit delighted about that. I was looking forward to that because I wanted to like really go in and like work with that and be like, I wanted to be the example of these can be feng shui fears, right? Follow the fear. These can be things that are no-nos or scary to just prove like, no, there's nothing that can't be remedied. And I moved into a home with some pretty big feng shui no-nos. Seriously, like huge, that people would be like, you're a practitioner and you chose to live here? Yeah.
Like, well, can you give us an example for those that don't know what you're talking about? What does that mean, a no-no?
Yeah. So for example, I have 3 that are actually huge. So there's when you walk in our door, you see stairs. That's a feng shui no-no. That's like, I literally had a teacher that was like, don't ever buy a house when you walk in, you see stairs right away because it's rushing energy, rushing chi, all of your energy goes away. We bought a house with a fireplace in prosperity, also in health. Huge no-no. Don't do that. Too much inflammation. Don't do that. There is a pool in the back left sector of the home of the property, but it also runs over fame and reputation. Huge no-no, right? Water's putting out the fire of fame and reputation, but it's also, and it's draining wealth and all of these things. And I'm like, I don't want people to live in fear of feng shui. Like I want to do this and be able to use it as a teacher and a lesson. And it's not like I'm going in with this ego of like, watch me. But it was, we really worked with spirit to manifest. This was the house that presented and that called to our family that we all loved. And so I knew I had to like lean in intuitively. And I was like, no, yeah, go do this. This is going to be good. And we love where we live. We love our home. We love our neighborhood, the school district. We love it. Like it was so welcoming. And we've been here for what we got here in July. So we've been here a little bit and it's been really fun. It's been really fun. I still haven't dialed in all of the remedies, but it's a work in progress. I think I always feng shui. Like I never stop. So I just hope that people don't fear it. I think it's feared too often,
That's
and then
great.
people just don't do anything.
Yeah, thank you. I so appreciate that you spoke about that. One of the one of the mantras I use a lot for myself and also with clients is given what is, what do you want to create? And the way I look at it is we are infinitely powerful creators. Like the human ability, the way spirit intersects with human means we literally can create whatever we want, right? We are the universe, we are infinity. So that means we can create anything. So I love that. And and it's I love that you said that about the stairs too, because I have a home that I love, and it's you walk up the front door and it's one stairs down, one stairs up, right? And go ahead.
Yeah, awful feng shui no, right? Like that would be in a feng shui book of like, oh, this is bad. Well, no, it's not. Like you just you figure it out. Like it's, you figure it out, and everything has a solution.
Well, and that's I think that's the two principles that I get from what you said is one, the reminder that we can create anything, we can take any circumstances, and yeah, I mean, and feng shui is a great, to me in this case, a great metaphor because hey, who were your parents? Where did you grow up? Right? What were your challenges and your advantages as a kid? Everybody's got a different story. Everybody's got a different background. And it's not that those things aren't real. It's just that that's what happened. Who you
Yeah.
can become is infinite, right? And the home seems like a great metaphor for that, right? And the other principle that you brought home really nicely is there's always a way to figure it out, right? And of course, for me personally, like I must need to learn that lesson like 8 million times because it happens on a daily basis where I'm like, oh no, and then it takes me whether 10 seconds or 10 hours to go, oh, okay, of course there's a way to work with that. There's a solution for it. So beautiful. Now, let's rewind a little bit because we spoke a little bit before the show, and you just mentioned about your family, and something you said earlier really caught my attention, which is that you've been in the foster parent system, fostering children, and that part of the success you've had in that has to do with the way you've arranged your home. Um, so,
Yeah.
can you say
I
more
do
about that?
believe that. Yeah, so we've decided, that we want to help the kids that want to be helped, and we, for whatever reason, we just feel called to teenagers, and it was interesting where we were in St. Louis. I had more than one caseworker that would come into our home, and that was the feedback that we would hear was just like, God, we walk into your home and kids like are instantly at peace, or like there was one kiddo in particular that I'm remembering, and he was on the spectrum, a total love, but he just couldn't ever calm. Like his nervous system was always going, and he couldn't ever whoosh. And literally, like, he had come a couple of times and he would just calm. Like, he'd walk into our house and he'd calm. And when we were showing our house, we have like indoor cameras or whatever. So we were listening to some of the feedback. And one of the women walking in was like, God, it's like a spa in here. I feel like I'm in like a spa, like about to get a massage. Because we did create that. And I mean, the truth is, we didn't like, of course, we cleaned up clutter and got stuff out when we were showing the house, but it really was shown as we kept it. Like, we didn't do too much to, shift it. Like, a lot of people will rearrange furniture and we really didn't do much. We didn't have to because it was just very peaceful and in flow. And so we found that there was a difference in, when kiddos would come in, they would find peace just a little bit easier. We would, be able to have conversations. We created a space for open communication and conversation. Now, it is not to say that we did not have challenges, because we did. We, of course, did. It's, these kiddos are so precious, yet they, there's a lot of kids, and we did respite. So we had a lot of kids in and out. And meaning that we provided care like on weekends and stuff. So for anybody that's ever called to like consider fostering, respite is a really great way to tune in to see if that's, something that you would ever want to do, because for kids in the foster care system, they can't just go and like stay anywhere for a weekend if you are, need a break or have prior plans. That's a really great thing to do. So that's maybe just a small, just something that I'm called to share for anybody, because there's so much help that's needed. But we'd get these, we'd get these kids that would come in and they would just have a different experience than what we were told, than what we were shown. Like it was, they would just show up and it was almost like we would just see their best version of themselves,
Mm.
And still, like, I even have another foster parent that we're still pretty close, that we shared a lot of kids. They lived up the street, and she'll still send me messages and be like, how did you get such and such to do that? Like, how did you get her to have that conversation? Gosh, I noticed this. Like, how did that happen? Like, how did, and I'm like, it's like intention and placement. Like, I really think that the home matters. And we do absolutely, even if they're just staying for one night, like, we hold the kiddos accountable for taking care of their space and not leaving clutter. And I teach them about that, and it's also like my son who was adopted, like, he will come in and he'll be like, I need something. Like, what essential oil do you have for this? Or, he's learning how to use the pendulum, and he's, meditated with us. And, so it's like, once they understand that there's a power for them to shift their own big emotions, they're kind of into it too at times, most of the time. Like, that's what I've found. So the feedback was kind of fun to watch.
Hmm.
It was fun to see.
That's awesome. I love it. What reminds me, there's a documented phenomena that happens in the education world. It's called the Pygmalion effect, and it was discovered, I think, if I remember right, by accident, because some educational experts came into a school and they told a group of teachers, these certain students over here, they are extra bright, right? Higher intelligence. And then they left. And so, and then they came back, the researchers that were posing as educational experts, they came back later, and guess what had happened? Those students had excelled far beyond the other children. They had no educational advantages, no higher intelligence, nothing was different about them. So the conclusion is, well, it was the teachers seeing them as being brighter. And so what does that mean? Did it mean they gave them more attention or more resources, or they just held them to a higher possibility? So when you talk about intention and the home, to me, that feels like it's very much related to that. And part of what I hear is something that is touching for me, is like, I see them as their highest possibility, see them as capable of calming down or being resourceful or whatever it is. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and giving them a space that reflects that back to them. Like, some of these residentials and really, like, the places they live or stay or get put in, like, it's like, I mean, it literally can look like a prison at times, So it's like, wow, when you can give a kiddo a room that it's like, yeah, let's choose your colors. Let's talk about what those colors mean. Let's talk about why we don't use white sheets in Feng Shui. Right. And it's like, you give them a room where they feel enriched. That's who they're going to want to be, right? They're going to want to step more into that, and versus like just like having like, there you go. Right. But like, make them a part of creating the environment and holding them accountable for really paying attention to their space. Yeah, it's like it's like they're trying on a new outfit, or it's like giving them that space. If you wake up to clutter in just a super low vibration space every day, like, of course you're not going to be able to show up to be your best self. I wouldn't. I wouldn't.
Well, and part of what I hear you teaching there is self-responsibility. And I imagine for so many of these kids coming into a venue or a location where they don't have any say in it, they're just, this is what you got. You should be glad you got this. Well, there's not much agency in that, right? It's a lot harder to step out of the victim role and into being at cause when you're not able to influence your or you feel like you're not able to influence your surroundings.
100% agree. Yeah. I mean, that I do have a bigger vision of one day, because I also lead retreats few times a year, and I have a bigger vision one day of having, a place to lead and for just beautiful, equal, balanced, like super lovely feng shui space for, women and men to go to learn, to transform. But then also to have it as an opportunity for, kids in the system, or disadvantaged children to come in and actually experience a higher vibration in a home, and maybe even have some jobs and maybe do some weekends retreat, and having like a subtle energy medicine program set up for them. Because a lot of times I think just experiencing a place that is enriched like that, it does so much for their resonance, for their frequency. It really helps to uplift them. um yeah, and that peace, that calm, that flow, it just naturally it helps the nervous system, you know? So
Well, so I would be negligent then if I didn't follow up. I can just hear people saying to me later on, you had Gina Nicole on your show and you didn't ask her that. So you said two things really important, like tantalizing there. One is you teach the children about the effects of clutter, right? So how do you do that? What do you tell them?
So, unfortunately, it has to kind of start as sort of this is our home and this is the way that we do things. Like, this is the way that we show up and we all contribute. And we have a thing in our home. We sort of say it's God, games, and grades that always come first. And in a part of, really like connecting with God, with spirit, whatever you want to call it, especially with kids, because you're always going to have different belief systems that we have to honor. And that's a part of just really showing up like responsibly and respectfully. And that is a part of being in, I do teach a lot about frequency. So being in a high frequency place and a high vibe place. And when you're in clutter, how do you feel? Like when this gets, and so usually it'll happen like one messy bedroom. And it's like, let's talk about how do you feel waking up to this? Like, do you walk in this room and just feel like, ugh? And then it's like, okay, let's clean it up. And I know for my son, like he really needed like labels and things organized to really like help him. And he's like, oh, like now he's like so on it, and he takes care of his room. And it's funny, like one of the people that he was in connection with formerly, she's like, how did you do that? Like, how did you get him to do that? And that it was a process. It starts like, crazy and chaotic. And then it goes back to like, this is a part of being in our home. This is a part of, keeping a high frequency. And then, how does this make you feel? Like when you wake up to this, like really not in a shameful way, but like really a reflection process. And like, let's clean some of this up. I'll help you. How does this feel? Let's feel amazing. And now you can get everything done and you know where everything is. And then they never really want to go back to that. And it's true. I mean, like I just have always been really successful with that approach of just really keeping them a part of the process and like talking about how it literally feels in their body. It's, and for all of us, I think that that's a good, and of course it is a boundary in our home. Like it's just something that we hold as it's a bottom line. It's a part of their contribution and something they're responsible for.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it seems very simple and practical. I told you earlier, like when I was a kid, I lived in just utter chaos and I didn't know any different. I also knew it didn't feel good. So as soon as I got out on my own, I was like, at the very least, I'm going to keep things orderly. Then in my early 20s, almost by accident, divine providence, I moved into this community house, which I was really nervous about at first. I was like, oh, this is going to be a bunch of hippies with, the sink filled up with spaghetti stained dishes and all. But I got there and I was like, wow, they had created this place into such a sanctuary. And I remember there was one woman that lived there in particular, and I became like her apprentice. And she just said
Wow.
over and over again, like, this is how we do things. Everything has its home. This is how, and then later when I became a parent, I realized like that's what animals in every species do with their young is they say in some way, this is how we do it, right? Mama dogs say to their puppies, no, we don't do that. We do this. And they communicate in different ways. But
This is how we do it. Yeah.
this is how we do it. Yeah. And I mean, and everybody's doing that, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. And that brings us back to what you said about just the intentionality being so important, like seeing the home as not only a reflection of us, but as a container that's either going to facilitate us living well or us living poorly. Then the question becomes, what's our intention? What do we want to create here? So
Yeah. And that it goes back to that a lot. I also think I'm going to add that breath, breath is really important. Breath work, but breath is really important in our home. Like, it's like if something gets heated, it's like, okay, we got to breathe, bring air into your body. And it's that same thing, right? It's like, you can't bring air into this room. You can't move it. It's the same thing. So we make that connection a lot too. So if there's something that's frustrating, or it's like, okay, well, let's breathe. Or if you don't feel like your body wants to breathe, go clean up. And then we'll come back to the conversation,
Well, and what do you say, or have you encountered it where you say, how does it feel to live in this clutter? And someone respond like, fine, I don't notice anything.
Yeah, I will say, like, we have definitely had that. And then it's like, okay, well, let's just clean it up and do it anyway. And now I want to know how you feel in this. It's like, oh yeah, okay, better. Like, because there's no denying, like, they never live in that. They never stay there. Yeah. And I will, it's like, what comes first, the chicken or the egg? When you have anyone that is so full of trauma, and I will say, like, being in the foster care system alone, regardless of what got you there, that's traumatic. Just being in the system is traumatic. So when you have any sort of trauma, it makes sense that you would, from a Feng Shui perspective, you would naturally sort of go to and feel maybe comforted or at one with an environment that is reflective of that. Lots of chaos and, whatever that is. But there's an unwinding and a loosening that can happen, right? Like, because the body and the home are so connected, that can happen when you clean. And I think that there is no denying that. There just isn't, like, especially when, for somebody that has incurred trauma, like being in foster care, it happens so quick. And then there's this, like, ease that can be like, oh, huh. And I'm sure it's really confusing too, right? Because it's like, whatever got you there. And depending on, you could go to a place that doesn't feel good, but if you do go to a place that's like, whoa, like, maybe this is safe. Maybe I'm safe. And you're testing, but the natural tendency for somebody with a nervous system that's fight, flight, freeze is going to be in a messy situation. But there can be an unwinding if you can work with both. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it goes back chicken or the egg. Which end do you start with? It's both relevant. And I'm aware, Gina, that time is flying on, and I could ask you another 400 questions. Though, let me pause for a minute and ask you what haven't I asked you about, or is there anything that you would love to share about that? That we haven't covered yet. And I noticed we've got a few people who have chimed in to say hi to you throughout our conversation here. So yeah, in our last couple minutes, what else might you like to share?
I never have an agenda.
Hey.
Have an agenda. Because this is we're in this, like, amazing, beautiful full moon. I just had, as I was sharing with you earlier, I just had a call about the full moon in Leo. I'm a Leo. I'm a Leo, right? A Leo sun is my sun sign. It's just this is such an empowering time. It's also, like, a pretty traumatic time, and there's a lot going on. Like, this weekend, I think, is going to bring some energy that rubs up against. But in general, this day, I just feel like there's so much about purpose and just shining your light. And, that's really what I feel like that's really what my work is all about, is just helping people to truly embody who they were born to be and shine their light and, just do them. And what a great time to do that. Like, it's the Leo full moon. It's today. So however you're going to do that too, we can set that intention here together to maybe feng shui your career sector. I'm actually sitting in my career sector. That's another thing. A lot of people said, they couldn't believe that I did my office. Like, my office is blacked out. It's my little divine feminine womb cave. I really love it. But the ceiling's black. The walls are all black. Black is a really good color for career. And I just think that it's a great time to pay attention to purpose and career. And I really love the Marianne Williamson quote that she shared, that if you're not yet pissing people off, you're not yet doing the right thing. Like, if you're not, and I want to just like share that piece. It's coming to me because of this full moon and where we're at. Yeah. And if there's, anything that we talked about that inspired anyone, I think today is a really beautiful day to dig deep into that inner fire.
Hallelujah.
Truly.
Nicely said. So on that note, then, what's the best way for people to connect with you if they're so inspired?
Yeah, I mean, I have my website's ginanicole.net. I have lots of online programming. There's a programs page. So, it just depends. Like, I connect with people in one-on-ones. I have 2 retreats coming up this year. Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Gina Nicole B. I'm obviously on Facebook. This is streaming there. And yeah, I love to connect over anything: feng shui, subtle energy medicine, foster care, copywriting. I'm a connector. I love to connect. So those are, ginanicole.net that's my website that has all of my info.
Perfect. And for anyone who's listening, whether live or by rebroadcast and not viewing, that's GINANICOLE.net.
Yep.
And great. Yes. Well, I'm sure you'll have a lot of people wanting to connect with you about all those things. And I love the diversity and broadness of your interests and expertise. So it's, I think, time for me to ask you the big final question, which is an impossible question because you've got so much experience, so much wisdom, and I'm going to ask you to ridiculously narrow it down. So it's impossible, but that also means you can't go wrong, right? So is that okay? May I ask you?
Sure.
All right. So given all that you know, if you had to boil it down to one thing and you're to say one piece of advice or information to our audience to help them to create a vibrant, thriving life, what's the one thing?
You know what's coming to me right now, so I'm just going with it. And it is where my journey really started after feng shui. And I'm Italian, and tarot started in, there's a connection with tarot in Italy, is to tune into that, because tarot was created from the 52 playing cards, and there's a whole story within those. And we have a birth tarot card, and it's there for us for daily guidance, and it really helps to keep us on track. And there is nothing new age about it. It is very old, and it is very safe, and it is not demonic. It's, just don't keep asking the same questions. But I would say that, like, I don't know why that's coming to me, but that's coming to me, is to, through your own intuition, to create your own spirit vocabulary, is to get to know that, to be friendly with it. It's an awesome tool. It's one of the things that really, really helped me expand.
That's fantastic. I love that. And it's funny for me because 28 years ago, I actually worked for a while traveling around Spain, reading tarot cards and astrology in a psychic fair with a bunch of chain smoking gypsies, right? That's another story for another time. However, it's come up several times just in the last few days for me about the tarot. And I love that you point out it's not new agey. It's very old. And what I've shared with people about it is what it is fundamental human archetypes, right? That we all have in us, we all experience. And one thing we know for sure, again, old age, the game is about self-mastery, right? At the Oracle of Delphi says, know thyself. And the more we can understand ourself and the human journey, the more power and success we have on it. So I love that that's what came to you and you brought that forward.
That's what came to me. That's what it was. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Gina, thank you so much for not just for being with us. I appreciate you taking the time, though, for all the work you've done to face the fear, follow the fear, to create yourself into someone who's so heartful and so dedicated to others. Whether that's your students or the world or the children that you work with. It's really beautiful, and it's such an honor to have you with us. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that reflection, and thank you for having me.
Total pleasure. All right. And for y'all, our audience, again, live or by rebroadcast, thank you, because your interest in creating your life with even more vibrancy, not only does it make your life better, not only is it your birthright, and I say obligation because we've got the technology, your interest and activity, and hopefully you've committed to at least one thing you're going to employ in your house today, in your life, that makes the world better. It really matters. So I appreciate you. I love you. I'm grateful for you tuning in. Thank you. Join us again soon. See you later. And in the meantime, please make your life a masterpiece. Mahalo for tuning in to the Art of Vibrant Living show, y'all. I'm Daniel Aaron, and may you live with great vibrancy.